friend. You're listening to The Sustainable Bodyworker, the podcast for massage therapists who want to grow thriving, purpose-led businesses without the burnout. Here we talk about nervous system aligned business strategy, pricing that makes sense, client work that doesn't deplete you, and how to build a career that actually supports your life. I'm your host, Gretchen Pop, massage therapist, mentor, educator, and recovering overachiever. Let's get into it. Hey friends, welcome back to the show. This one is such a juicy one. I'm so excited, especially if you have been feeling exhausted no matter what you do for self-care. Maybe you take some time off thinking that that will solve the problem for you, but even when you're resting, your body just does not recover from that. I actually personally found for a long time my body would end up using my vacation time or even just the weekends I had off to finally express how horrible I was feeling because I was on overdrive in my life and in my business for so long on my working days. And I forced myself to work through it and finally crashed on the time I did have off. So if you can resonate with that, if you're maybe always spending your winter break, vacation, whatever, just completely sick because that's the only time you give yourself off of work. Maybe you're feeling exhausted and in pain no matter what you do. Even with a healthy amount of days off, this episode is for you. Because today, Kelsy and I here, we're digging into what rest actually means and how to make it a part of your rhythm, not just something that you earn after working really hard and doing all of it first. So when your body finally breaks down and is begging for it, if that's the only time you give yourself rest, if you're being demanded of that by your body because you're not fitting it in, we're going to talk about how to fit that in a lot better. So I am here with my co-host, Kelsy Filler, who brought up the 7 types of rest a few weeks ago when we first started talking about working on the pod together. And I think that this is just such a great topic and applies to us as massage therapists specifically, not just because our work is so physically and emotionally demanding, but also because we are a part of our clients' paths toward wellness. And we provide them their own little bit of rest in one of those categories, which we're going to get into. And when we can be a lot more aware of where we might be overstimulated or depleted in certain areas, we can be so much more effective for them and also helping ourselves feel better overall. So Kelsy, thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I feel like so much of this aligns with all of our normal conversations and day to day anyway, so it just feels so good to put it to a recording and share it with people.
Agreed. And also, since this is kind of like the introductory episode bringing you on here, people are going to be seeing our conversation so much. I joked on social media, but it's so totally true about how part of what stimulated the idea of having you on for the podcast was that we just have such great conversations in general. So we may as well just invite people to listen to it. I'm really excited about that. Yeah. So there was a quote that you shared with us on the document, and there, guys, if you're listening, check out the accompanying PDF. It's linked in the show notes. This is going to help guide you through what we're talking about today and help assess this for yourself. But Kelsy, there was a quote that you shared on there, and I figured you might share that with us and kind of set the stage for what we're going to be talking about.
Oh, perfect. So today, as you've mentioned, we are talking about a concept of 7 types of rest that you can start paying attention to and making small changes on a daily basis. It was first introduced by a woman named Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, and she is quoted in saying, "I don't think that we can manage stress. Stress is the changes and challenges that come up in our lives. You cannot manage change and challenge or take them out of the equation entirely. They're always going to be there. But what we can do is have control over how we respond to each of the changes and challenges that we face and how we choose to recover from them. That is what real rest is. And the amazing thing about all of the changes that we talk about today is that they will be able to be implemented today during your session while you're at home. It's not a class in the future. It's all right here. It's also always something you can be mindful of.
Yeah, and that's so important to the mission of this podcast and what we work on in the membership as well, is that it's accessible. I thought for a long time that this self-care, and this is part of the reason why it was so challenging for me to start taking care of myself early on in my career, is because we think that it has to be like, oh, I have to have this really lengthy yoga practice, and if I'm not doing it for an hour a day, then it's not worthwhile, or I have to meditate for X amount of hours a day, and that can be so inaccessible. Even something just sitting down and meditating is challenging on its own. So when we go over these types of rest, I'm really excited. We've got these concepts that are really easy to implement in your session or outside of session, and just stir the pot of ideas. This is not a exhaustive list of what we can do. We can always think of more and more things. I'll be sharing some things that work really well for me. I'm sure Kelsy will have a ton of things that are totally different from what I do. And I'm sure that by listening to this as well and just kind of contemplating and sitting with like, how does that sit with me? We can each individually come up with our own idea and own resonance of what that is, even if it's as simple as like, when I sit with this beverage in my hand, I feel its warmth, I have a mindful moment. I feel like, I actually personally, this mug I love so much because it has bumps on it and it's handmade, so it has a specific energy about it. So being able to feel the mug, feel the warmth, take a deep breath, something that takes 30 seconds like that can actually be a type of rest. So let's get into what those types of rest are. I'll just like name them all briefly, and then we can go individually one by one into them. But we've got physical rest. I think that's the one that most of us like really think about when we think about self-care. We've got mental rest, emotional rest, sensory rest. That one was interesting to me. I had no concept for that before, so we're going to get into that. Social rest, creative rest, and last but definitely not least, spiritual rest. So let's start with physical rest. Kelsy, what are some things that people might notice that we are when we're not physically rested?
So I guess a good preface for all of the types of rest, but this one especially, is that signs of depletion can come from both an overactivity as well as an underactivity. So whether your depletion is coming from exerting yourself too much physically on a regular basis, or having an abundance of underactivity, as some of us fall into on occasion, the signs of depletion in physical rest are going to be generally fatigue, soreness, poor posture, and sleep disruption. And although this wasn't mentioned in Dr. Saundra's work or in any of the research I did following her train of thought, I personally believe that digestive issues can become a part of this as well. Of course, it's also so intricately connected. And if we are not feeling safe and physically sound in our own body, I feel like our digestive system is one of the first signs of that as well. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because if you think about it, okay, going back to the nervous system response, when digestion is disrupted, if you look at it through that, um, the nervous system response, it's literally shut off more often than not because we're in a fight or flight. If we need to run or fight something, our bodies are not going to be in the mode of like, let's get as much nourishment out of this as possible. It'll either have a pause and it'll stop digesting. Therefore, any number of things can happen. Even people with slow, poor digestion can end up having food ferment in their stomachs because it's moving so slowly, it's rotting inside of them, which is really disgusting when you think about it. Or you end up having really fast digestion because that response to get everything out. I'm sure everyone has heard the expression that like they were so scared they shat their pants. Like that's a response. So having either very slowed digestion and causing those, maybe it's flatulence or things like that because it's moving so slowly, or things that move so quickly and therefore leading to malnourishment because the food isn't in there long enough for us to gain the actual nutrition from it.
Every time.
What
Yeah.
was that?
The number of times I hear clients talk about how things are like going right through them, like whether it's if people are dealing with constipation on one hand, the fermentation you're talking about, or how everything seems to go right through them because they don't have the processes internally in place to fully digest. Yes, that definitely resonates.
That makes so much sense. Yeah. Well, and then also, I mean, bringing this back to the massage therapy standpoint, when clients are on the table and their digestion finally starts moving again. I once had a client on the table. This was early in my career, and it like just really shocked me. And her belly started making the grumble sounds because she was resting. And then she smacked her own belly out of embarrassment, like telling it to stop. And I didn't know how to I was so young at that time. I didn't know how to handle just creating space and holding space for that. But I think that there's a culture of embarrassment around our own body movement, which kind of even goes into exacerbating those digestive issues as well, because we're all of a sudden having that response to a relaxation response and kind of getting ourselves back into that negative feedback loop.
Yes. I'm so glad that there are other therapists that seem to be more mindful of that as well. I think we've had conversations about this before where if a client does find themselves apologizing for their stomach growling or gurgling or all the fun noises that it can make, every time they apologize, it's like, no, this is a really good nod from your nervous system. You are resting, you are digesting, and it's an honor to be able to see that switch in people's physiology on the table. It's so cool.
Yeah, I wish more people knew how much of a compliment it was when I hear their stomach grumbling. It's like, oh, you're relaxing. But in the meantime, they're like, oh, I'm embarrassed about this. Such a funny divide. Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many ways that we can physically rest and so many ways that we can, we think that we have to just like lay on the couch. I was definitely one of those people. And sometimes, like when I'm really depleted, I still have this tendency, but I would just crash on the couch. I remember after, it didn't even have to be a long day at work, to be quite frank. I would spend most of my time completely crashed out on the couch. I was addicted to television, and that was the only way my body was able to dissociate, and it forced that out of me. I've recently actually, and I think that this brings up the really important point that you were talking about earlier, where each section or each type of rest has a like an excess or depletion sign. And for me, I found that when I find myself crashing, that's actually when I need to go outside and walk. It's not that I need to go out and do a million jumping jacks or like exert myself super physically, but that movement is actually really important to allow myself to recalibrate, even though that seems counterproductive and I just want to crash. I'm wondering if you're doing your research, you kind of had some aha moments around what that is, why that movement actually is going to resolve my desire to crash out on the couch.
That's such a good question. So, the research that I found didn't quite go into the mechanics of how it does make us feel better. But I feel really grateful that within our practice and learning about whether it's the circulatory system, about the lymphatic system, about the fascial system, in my mind, if I feel depleted from a state of underactivity, and I'm able to go outside for a little walk, go through a little sun salutation with yoga, or even just do sometimes even just the process of tuning in and not going for a specific therapeutic stretch, but just good little just move your arms and legs. And when you tune into what that does for your fascia, when you tune into how that can get the lymph flowing, that can get the blood flowing, it just feels so innately settling, even without having an understanding of the mechanism of why it does that. And anything that gives you that deep sensation of in your body, the same thing that you were talking about with feeling the bumps on your cup and the warm from the cup. We can get that same sensation internally from some of the smallest movements, even. And when you are able to feel good in that movement and follow that into a walk or a full stretch or anything, then wonderful. But sometimes it really just takes tuning into those little movements, I feel like.
You bring up such an important point with that, the tuning in. And I'm actually so excited because the next hypnotherapy track that I'm developing for the membership is a process that somatically allows you to fully experience your body. And I think that when it comes down to that tuning in aspect, being able to just sit there, like we don't have to go and bench press and go on a big cardio bonanza. If that's your thing, by all means, go do that. But if you're like me and you're more of a yin movement type of person, I don't do well with exerting too much energy. That's just my nature. but being able to like go into your body and see like, okay, how is it feeling? Don't try to change anything necessarily. Yes, if your body wants you to move, experience that, but tap into how it's feeling, where that is. And oftentimes just connecting with our bodies in that way allows that sensation to shift. For example, in working on this practice and learning about different techniques that other mindfulness practitioners have shared in this method and figuring out what really resonates with me, I've been tuning into this, not really a pain, but this stagnation and this lock feeling in my left hip, kind of SI joint area. And in just tuning in to that sensation without, we always are like, oh, okay, what can I do? I can do this psoas stretch. What might this be? I need to strengthen my core. We go all into that mental aspect of it, but just sitting with it and feeling it miraculously, for lack of a better word, allows it to kind of dissipate because there's a part of it that just wants to be seen. And I think part of the reason why our bodies cry out so much is because we are so dissociated from them. We have a dissociative tendency to get away from the pain. And especially when I was on my vibe mat the other day, I was like, okay, I'm going to be experimenting with that thought process of just feeling into the sensation and then allowing those vibrations to settle in and create that harmonization. Because when I have found sometimes when I'm on the vibe mat, I'm like, oh, I'm in pain and I'm trying to dissociate from it, those frequencies aren't able to tap in because my body is in that frequency of no, 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 I'm dissociating, and it's disharmonious. And just for anyone who's interested in talking about the frequency, we will absolutely have a whole other episode on talking about vibrational therapies and things like that, because that's fascinating and a total tangent. But just tapping in and feeling where our body is at, giving ourselves that ability to just stretch and step into the cloak that is our body, right? We become embodied. Yeah. Being able to do that is what can oftentimes allow those discomforts to dissipate.
Yes, I completely agree. You said my favorite word for that subject too, allow. Just allowing your body to be as it is in this moment, to process what it's processing, experience what it's experiencing without placing the judgments and subsequent fixes toward it. That's some potent medicine.
Yeah. And much easier said than done as
Oh,
well
of course. No,
sometimes.
yeah. I mean, I will link you to, I had a little couch crash out yesterday, even. Like it's an ebb and flow, and this is a practice just as much for me as I'm sure it is everyone else.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when it comes to physical rest, when it comes looking at like in session and out of session, what are some tips that a massage therapist might bring into their practice?
So the first thing that I will say, just because it is such a common topic for massage therapists, whether you are straight out of massage school or in massage school, or you've been doing it for decades, proper body mechanics, be at the most basic level, just to be sure that the work that we are doing day in and day out is not contributing to the depletion of our physical rest. Whether that's outside of standard body mechanics, of course, we big tool girlies, like we're all about the cups, the gua sha, anything that can take some of the strain off of our hands, learning modalities that focus on fists and forearms, experimenting with different table heights depending on both one's style and the stature of their body throughout their practice, incorporating. I know someone who does pretty much a majority of their work sitting on a stool. There's so many different ways that a person can go about it, but it is in doing the work to have the proper body mechanics and the proper tools at your disposal and combining it with that physical process of embodying, tuning in. And just because you learned a certain technique, whether it's with body mechanics or a tool, integrating that with how you feel in that moment, how you feel in that process, and being willing to make the little adjustments as that goes on. I feel like that if there's one takeaway, I feel like that someone can gain from this episode that you will be able to feel a difference today. Just ask yourself how every sequence you are going through feels in your body. Are your ears up by your shoulder? Is your back hunched a bit? Do you feel like you're clenching towards the back of your skull? Is your core properly engaged? How rooted are your feet into the floor that you're working from? What is the sensation you're feeling? And even if you are using forearms or fists, are you clenching your wrist as you're going through your forearm sequence? Are you clenching your shoulder? Is everything properly stacked? I don't, as we're talking about it, I feel like you could probably do a whole episode on body mechanics alone at really diving into that pillar. But aside from being fully mindful, fully embodied as you are going through your own session, you can also stretch or do breathing exercises similar to what we've already talked about in between sessions. There are times where I find myself even incorporating little breathing techniques during a session if I do find that if someone's come in and they've had a particularly stressful day, maybe they've even just had a lot of caffeine or they have something going on to where energy is up, like they're physically up. And since a part of this process is meeting people where they're at in the beginning and helping them shift down, I will find myself having to do little breathing exercises, or when I have the space available in a technique, like working a little stretch for myself into the sequence to kind of let things settle. But in terms of depletion, sometimes I will find if someone comes in and they are very zen, you get into a very deep flow state during the session. I'm sure we haven't talked about this, but I'm sure you've experienced it as well, where you feel so settled, so zen after a session that I need to bring myself back up. I will find myself doing whether it's like little push-ups, little lunges, little squats. It doesn't have to be a whole set, but just doing something to get that blood flow going, get that lymph moving, tune back into my fascia body, get to a slightly more elevated state to be able to meet the next person where they're at as well. So those are the most effective ways that I've found to incorporate conscientious physical rest during sessions.
Yeah, and that's such an important thing to mention that we meet our clients where they're at, often not. And if we are caught unawares, if we're not prepared, if we're not in a good mental state, like we're just in between clients and we're shoving down a snack bar while like checking Instagram and like kind of in our own chaos before the next client is totally guilty of that, by the way. If we're in that state and then the next client comes in and they are having a horrible day. For example, I had a client recently who was on the phone. I think they were in the process of firing an employee while on the phone, walking in late for their appointment, and just had to take a minute and cry before getting on the table. And as soon as I noticed that, it's like, okay, I went back and I took some space and I'm like, I am going to be holding space for this client who is in a tizzy. But at the same time, more often than not, I mean, everyone's coming in with their own energy, and it can be really exhausting always kind of recalibrating in order to meet those clients where they're at. And another thing I'm thinking as you're talking about these things is that each of these types of rest, I feel like we just spoke about tools for so many different aspects and layers of the types of rest, which is really encouraging too, because if you think about it, 7 types of rest, oh my gosh, I've got to fit in not just one piece of self-care, but 7 types of self-care. But really, they're all super interconnected and they feed into each other. And I think one thing that will be really helpful as we continue on with this conversation is just acknowledging if you're, feeling that way at all as you go through this, the tool that we've developed to be able to kind of assess where we're at allows you to kind of recognize where your starting point is, and rest assured that as long as you start there, it will naturally start to uplift the other sections or the areas as well. So they all support each other. So I'd like to touch on mental rest now, which I think also when it comes to calibrating for our clients and getting into that space, that's a really nice segue because that's a mental load as well. When that client comes in who's taking a lot of energy, or that we need to be really cognitively clear for, that's a big mental load. And I would love to know what you've discovered, Kelsey, that have been signs that someone might be depleted or kind of overloaded in the mental rest zone.
The most common things people find themselves experiencing if they are in need of a bit more mental rest, whether overactivity or underactivity, ends up being mental fog, forgetfulness, overthinking, and boredom. I This one I feel like is particularly interesting to me as someone. I have ADHD, which a default of that wiring is that I will find myself getting out of sorts if I am not mentally stimulated enough. So, a lot of the information I was able to find on this column does address the overactivity of a mental state and finding ways to bring yourself down to a state of being mentally settled. Whereas I think it's important to acknowledge that there are a lot of people, even outside of the realm of ADHD, there are a lot of people who neurologically have trouble finding mental rest in their minds naturally with some of these practices and have an easier time finding mental rest by working with their hands and being physical, which is honestly one of the primary reasons that I love being a massage therapist as much as I do, because it's turned into a bit of a moving meditation in that sense.
Yeah. Well, moving meditation is so important. I remember I was speaking to another friend, who's an intuitive coach about how meditation does not need to look any certain way. The biggest block for a lot of people who are mentally overstimulated and think about a lot of things, and we're human, our brains are designed to think. That's what they're going to do. We'll never have it stop thinking. We just need to tell it what to think about, which is meditation. And the biggest block for many of us is that it won't stop. And being able to develop that movement meditation is a really great practice, recognizing that it is your ability to be mindful about something and have that focus. There's a story that I was told, I believe it's in the Buddhist tradition, that I don't know, like it's a story from there, but there's an elephant walking through the market will cause chaos, swinging its trunk around and make a big mess. But you give the elephant a twig to hold on to with its trunk, and it will be focused on holding that twig and it won't make a mess. And our minds are the same way. If you don't give your mind something to focus on, it's going to run amok and it's going to make a big old mess. So meditation and mantras really are what you give your brain to focus on. And so whether you do that with a seated meditation, or you do that with your massage practice, or you do that with, I love yoga for that. I find yin yoga to be one that is so incredibly intense that it allows me to go, oh, that's an intense sensation in my body. I can very much focus on that. It kind of turns up the volume of, strong sensation kind of overrides how loud the volume is in my brain. And that works really, really well for me. One tool that I give for people who tend to be very creative like me with, I always have this idea and I want to do this thing, and I'm an idea machine. And I joke with my students that get to receive coaching with me. I coach in a different space and I've got these Post-its all over the wall, because whenever I have an idea, I've got to put it down on a Post-it and put it on the wall to be like, yes, okay, you are a valid idea, but I don't want you in here. You need to go on the wall, because otherwise you're just cluttering up space. So a tool that I provide for that, and I do this for myself almost on a weekly basis, is a brain dump. I literally just take the time to write out everything that's been in my brain, because if it's inside my brain, it's taking up space, it's making me anxious, and it's not giving me the brain space to be able to focus on the one thing that I need to be focusing on, because I have all these other tangential ideas about all these other cool things that will probably give me more dopamine. And that's really what my brain is looking for, right? So if I have the ability to be like, okay, nope, brain dump. And if it's a really shiny idea, it gets a Post-it on the wall. And on that Post-it, I can add those tangent ideas, but that really clears out the brain. And I think that having a practice like that, whether it is a meditative practice or just literally dumping everything out, I sometimes do a brain dump while I meditate as well. I intentionally sit down with a notebook so that when those things come up, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that goes there. Now there's more space in my brain. That's just something that works really, really well for me. And when I find myself, and it's not like this is rare, this happens very regularly. When I find myself in a place where I have analysis paralysis, I am so overburdened. I feel like I have too many things going on that I cannot work. That's my cue. I've developed that muscle of like remembering that's when I need to do a good brain dump session. Go in the middle of nowhere and just dump it all out. And it really is quite a magical experience.
It's beautiful. That's actually, that reminds me of in the book, The Artist's Way. There's a practice called morning pages. I'm sure, yeah, you're aware. It's incredible. Incorporating it on whether it's a daily or weekly basis, it moves, it might, honestly, it brings me back to what we were talking about with the like allowing sensations within the body, and you're able to externalize that allowing to create space for even more creativity to come in by writing it out and sticking it on your sticky board. I love the idea.
Yeah, well, and you're honoring it too, because when you keep it in your brain and you don't give it a place, it's kind of like you have to shove it away. And it's like, if you think about it like a little small child that's like tugging at mama's skirt, like, mama, 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 and mom's having a conversation. This is like one of my biggest pet peeves, by the way, witnessing children just be ignored. It's like, they've got good ideas too. Give them space. So it's kind of like that. You've got this idea that's tugging on your skirt saying, I want to be seen. I want to be seen. And for the metaphor sake, if you just turn to the kid for a second, and this works in parenting as well, it's a very good parenting hack, just pausing for a second, saying, I hear you, I'll be there with you in just a moment, and just acknowledging them. Same thing for your thoughts, by giving it a post-it note and putting it in a place on the wall or a place in your journal, making sure you look back at it every once in a while. It gives your psyche the place where that idea is coming from, which is a genuine place. Usually it's very much connected to the inner child. So I think that analogy is very relevant. It gives that place the acknowledgement that like, oh, okay, I am important. But when you keep it in your brain and you're like, no, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. I need to focus on that. It doesn't really value or honor the fact that it is valid. And it starts to layer on this subconscious belief that you're not worthy, or that your ideas aren't valuable, or that you'll never make anything happen, because you're subliminally telling yourself that those ideas that are coming through this divine channel are not being honored.
At the very least, even if someone isn't, I have a lot of clients, I wonder if you have this experience, who are very, anything that is mentioned with like divine alignment or energy, they automatically close off to. And I feel very grateful for that, because I'm always trying to figure out ways to flip the script to make it resonate with people in a way that fits their own life experiences. And at the very least, from a neurological perspective, if you have this beautiful idea generating machine and you do not make a practice of bringing that into the external, your brain is going to stop working with those neurological connections. If you are not bringing that into your life or feeling the benefits from it anyway, then neurologically your brain is going to be like, why am I going to spend the energy to try to bring all of these things into light if they're never acknowledged? So it's amazing. That's another
Yeah.
one. It feels like we could go very deep with that one.
Very deep. Yeah. And again, this layers into so many different aspects. I mean, we could jump over into like how that can like helps us with the sensory aspect or the creative aspect, and all of it. They all tie in together. So again, just an encouragement for the listener to whichever one you feel like is the most strong, or use the assessment tool that we're providing in the show notes to kind of assess for yourself. Just start somewhere that feels like it resonates with you, and it will trickle into the rest. So let's scoot into the next not level, but let's scoot into the next category of emotional rest. And this one hits deep with massage therapists and care providers in general. I think that, the majority of us in this profession are female. And so there's kind of a double layer here that I'm just going to call out the elephant in the room, that it's not just that we hold space for others in a professional setting. Many of us are holding space for others in our home life as well. And compassion fatigue is a real thing. And being able to connect with our emotional rest in a good way. So I sometimes, I mean, for me, I have very strongly have that sense of I can take care of myself when everyone else is taken care of. And of course, I have this habit of accumulating pets. I've got like how many chickens now? I don't even know. And I've got all the dogs, and now we have cats, and I've got the kid. Like, I love the animals, and I've got the plants that I take care of. And but that adds to my sense of so many categories need to be taken care of before I feel like I've earned taking care of myself. And I know that this resonates with so many of us here because we are quite possibly the most attuned to be caring for others type of people naturally by being in this profession. And so sometimes calling ourselves out and recognizing this as like, yes, it's a beautiful aspect of who we are as people, but because of that, we probably owe it even more to ourselves and the ones that we care for to take care of ourselves first and foremost and support our emotional capacities. And that starts with being aware of what those signs are that we might be depleted or needing more nourishment. So, what are those, Kelsey?
So, some of the signs that we might be feeling a depletion in emotional rest in our life is compassion fatigue, exactly like you mentioned. That's probably one of the biggest thorns I feel like people mention in all of the body workers forums or subreddits. Irritability, whether that comes from a sense of feeling reactive, no matter if you're default wiring is to get a little angry or to get a little sad or to start dissociating ultimately. Or if people start to internalize their clients' emotions. If you come home from work at the end of the day and technically things are good at home with your family and your relationships, you've been taking care of yourself, but if you still feel like there is something that needs to be worked through, there's a chance that you have been taking in the grief, the anger, the work stress, the lifetime of experiences that people ultimately come in with, especially people who, if they have never had a massage before or they are not used to tuning into their body in any sense, it's kind of amazing some of the things that can come out for the first time as they are reintroduced to themselves at a physical level. So if you are not conscientious of it, in the same way, there's this concept of energetic hygiene within massage, and I will get to that later, but there's emotional hygiene as well. If you do have a very big heart, a very empathetic understanding, as so many massage therapists that come into the field do, it can be incredibly easy to start picking up the things that your clients are letting go of without even realizing it.
Yep. Yeah, I experienced that very, very strongly early on in my career. And I remember when I took this one class, I think it was my first CE class outside of actual massage school. It was a Save Your Hands workshop, and it was lovely. I've actually been trying to figure out where the instructors are because they were phenomenal. So if anyone knows what that is, send that my way. It was a husband and wife who did a great job. Anyway, when I took this class, I had just been starting my journey experiencing fibromyalgia. And I tell this story in various capacities, but to put it concisely, I had an experience about 2 years into my career where I started feeling the sunburn sensation all over my body. And then to the point where I was feeling very, very sharp stabs of pain in various joints down my legs and down my arms. And I was incapacitated from being able to work for about 2 months. And along that time, I was actually sent to this class because my boss thought that I was suffering from a burnout experience and I needed to save my hands. And she was right, but it was not my hands that needed saving. However, I met a person there who I told this story to. She was an older woman who had been in the profession for a while. And she told me, oh, you need to start wearing citrine. And I'm like, what is that? Is some kind of like orange necklace? Like I had no idea about crystals at this time. And now I'm absolutely obsessed. But I did. I remember I went to a metaphysical fair and was specifically looking for citrine to wear because her thought was that I was taking on people's energy. And that's what I was really good at. I was able to hold space and be able to absorb the whatever yucky energy and pull it out, but I wasn't processing it back down into the earth where it can be recycled or back up into the ether or whatever practice works best. I do have a hypnotherapy track inside the membership that allows us to connect to that channel both up and down before we go into our sessions so that we don't hold on. And I know if you've been in this work for any amount of time, you know what that feels like when someone's stuff starts creeping up your arms, and being able to hold your space and recognize that, like, yes, you might be a channel, but you are not the end place where that stuff lands. That's a really important practice. But I mean, starting out working at 19 years old, not having any concept for energetic enmeshment, I was just doing a great job serving my clients, absorbing all of it, and I ended up completely incapacitated. And I mean, that, in addition to many other things I was going through in my life, contributed to that incapacitation. But I think that when it comes down to it, hypnotherapy has been such a reliable tool for me to be able to get into a place where I can adequately hold space without compromising my own physical wellness.
Mm. That's actually a wonderful tangent to one of the best practices to maintaining your emotional rest, which is setting good boundaries with clients, whether that is energetically or if we're talking about the mental stress of upholding your cancellation policy, your scheduling policies. It's so necessary. I was about to say it's so effective, but it is truly necessary. It is not sustainable to be doing the things that we are doing on a daily basis without having very well rooted boundaries. And those boundaries can be rooted in compassion and understanding and all of the wonderful things that we have been talking about that can lead to emotional depletion. But boundaries are beautiful. Boundaries are so beautiful.
Well, and the funny thing is, I bet people are like, wait, that's a type of rest? That's a type of self-care? And yeah, it's not just a business strategy. It's not just a way to make sure that you get paid for the time that someone no-shows you. It's not just a strategic three-dimensional thing. Boundaries literally are part of our boundaries with our policies, boundaries with how we communicate with people, how when we answer our phone, that is all relative to the energetic field that we hold. And if we're not honoring that, then we cannot maintain a sense of integrity around the space that we're holding for people. So it's funny to think about how that can be a form of rest and taking care of yourself. And, you know, the biggest block I found when working with people through their boundaries and enforcing policies, or even writing out what their policy is and not feeling like a bitch saying, no, I can't serve you because it's already 20 minutes into your appointment and there's not enough time. You know, there's a lot of subconscious blocks and programming around why we can't do that, you know, as people pleasing women or as people pleasers in general. Doesn't matter your gender or how you associate. It's the way that we are taught to serve others does not include saying no. And so that's another reason why I have so much hypnotherapy around boundaries and even firing clients, because those subconscious blocks can be worked with. And it really, really, really is a self-care tool. You cannot serve all of your clients in a way that is ideal if you are experiencing this anxiety attack because you're not going to pay rent because someone no-showed and you don't have the know-how or the confidence in yourself to be able to send that invoice for the missed session.
Yes. I love how you tied that into the subconscious aspect of things as well, because I feel like obviously we feel what's going on subconsciously in all of the types that we're talking about today, but I feel like the emotional level is one of the first layers that anything subconscious in terms of what we are feeling at our core and how that manifests into limiting beliefs. Like that is felt, I believe, like in our emotions, and then therefore spreads into the physical, the mental aspect. There's not a layer that the foundational emotional rest doesn't touch. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it might be. And again, that's why I get so obsessive about the hypnotherapy because it is kind of like the hub where each of the spokes, all of these other categories really do kind of connect back down to. So if you are able to connect with that and work with the subconscious beliefs that is keeping you from allowing yourself to go on a walk on a beautiful day, or that's keeping you from sitting down and doing the brain dump that you need to do, or the thing that's keeping you from saying no to a client who's asking for a last minute session, or whatever it is, it's all that subconscious block.
I love that comparison of the hub of the wheel. That really resonates.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on to sensory rest. This one was something that I was like, oh, that makes sense, but I never even considered that. My daughter, for example, so, raising a kid in this day and age, we become aware of sensory issues. You hear that phrase, like, my kid's got sensory issues. My daughter likes to chew on things. And it was very apparent during COVID when she was wearing a mask all the time. She'd always have all of these, like, I don't even know how much cotton has accumulated in her digestive tract because all of her masks had this chew. And this is a common thing among children, but it makes so much sense that we are hyperstimulated in this day and age. Me, myself, I'm actually starting to force myself to not listen to an audiobook when I go out in the garden or go do a bath without having my devices around, because I would read a book or I'd listen to a course or something because, and I'm forcing my daughter also. She's like, "Can I go listen to my audiobook?" I'm like, "No, let's do 30 minutes without sensory something, like just go allow your brain to be bored because it opens up the space." So that, like, when you created this on the doc and showed me all of this, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. So I would love for you to kind of fill in those gaps for the rest of us listening.
Oh, it's so amazing because the sensory aspect is one of those that it is tied into everything that we do. Even if you are just sitting and listening mindfully to your body, there is no escaping sensory input in this world, ultimately. I mean, unless you're going sensory deprivation tanks or super deep transcendental meditation, that's another fun tangent. But ultimately, sensory rest is something that can be managed every single moment in a super mindful way. And so signs of depletion in sensory rest are things like overstimulation, headaches, light or sound sensitivity. And it's amazing because both during a session, if you feel like you fall on the underactive side of sensory rest, again, with ADHD, that is one where if I do not feel mentally or sensory stimulated, it can be hard to get momentum to do simple things, even sometimes, to where I feel like I often fall on the under sensory input kind of way, to where I do find myself, I like to have my massage room, the blinds slightly open to where there's a little more light in. Still comfortable for the client, of course. If I do have the choice, I like a bit more stimulating music, something. I know we vibe over the instrumentals, the guitar and things like that during massage sessions. So the music can be changed to be a little more stimulating, or of course, on the other side of things, to be even more relaxing. It's beautiful. In our treatment rooms, you have complete control over the sensory input for both you and your client in a way that it can be the most nurturing for both of you. And it's, I believe, a really fun and beautiful creative process to figure out what that is for each massage therapist. But a lot of it comes from the work that we're doing outside of the massage room as well. So if we are so zen in our treatment room, but every single second that we are outside of the treatment room, it is bright lights, loud noises, traffic, conversations constantly with people, or even if you're not talking to people, like you said, I'm also a podcast and music addict. I most often have headphones in my ears, but it's amazing because there is clinical research coming out that just 2 hours of silence at home, even with earplugs or noise canceling headphones, can actually clinically proven stimulate neurogenesis in your brain, so the production of new neurons. And it becomes this really beautiful, I know we've touched on the synergy of all of these types of rest so much this episode already, but the stimulating the process of neurogenesis, that feeds so much into the mental and creative types of rest as well. It gives more room to that same space that we were talking about, where it's like, look at all of these amazing things that are just coming to me, all of these beautiful ideas that I get to put into practice in all the different facets of life, even outside of massage. And I personally believe that listening to the birds, listening to the wind through tall grass, listening to your chickens in the morning. I also listen to my chickens every morning. It's so calming. You can find sensory input even if you aren't going 2 hours, however often, with noise canceling headphones, just tuning in to the smaller sensory inputs comparatively to social media and all of our other busy sensory inputs. It can be so meditative without trying to be meditative.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you mentioned listening to the birds because that's one of my favorite things about Virginia. We have so many birds here, so many different types of song. I like to joke that they have different slots of the day because you'll hear specific birds during specific times of the day. And I heard somewhere, don't quote me on this, but my brain is reminding me that I heard somewhere that birdsong is actually healing. It's shown to actually allow for the healing and something about how the trees interact with bird song. It's very interesting. So there's some science there, but my brain isn't actually pulling up the source. So don't cite me on this, but it's a magical thing. And one thing that I think is really important when it comes to the sensory piece that I don't think that we acknowledge is that we are being overstimulated constantly by other people's opinions and other people's experiences of the world. Every time we open social media, every time we turn on the news, every time we get sensory input from any media whatsoever, especially if we start our day with that, we are setting the tone for our day being in a judgmental state, being like, even if you're going there for inspiration and you follow a ton of inspiring accounts, there's a piece of our brain that automatically compares our life to that and allows us to be in a kind of judgmental state about our own life. And we're being hyper stimulated with all of these other experiences, other ideas. There might be a political thing that comes on and like completely throws you off track. And so when we recognize one of the things that we actually really do have control of in our life is where we place our attention. It's one of the few things that we do have autonomy for, even though a lot of us have become addicted to social media and that dopamine hit that we get from it is so strong. It really is challenging. But it is one of the places that we do have autonomy in is where we place our attention. And that sensory input in social media, especially if we don't take that time to intentionally curate what we're following and what we are doing with that tool and when we are placing our attention there, that can be something that really does derail us and allows for a time of dysregulation to occur without us even recognizing like, oh snap, I just did that to myself.
I completely agree. It's an incredible little feedback loop that ends up happening. And it's amazing because I do feel like if we do give ourselves the sensory space, I feel like it's a necessary component to something you talk about frequently, like integration. Integration, not just of the things that you're learning, for example, the tools that we learn as massage therapists to incorporate in our sessions, but for integration of everything we are experiencing day in, day out, every conversation, every bit of insightful information, every hardship, even every creating sensory space through stillness, through quiet. I feel like it's a necessary ingredient to allowing the integration of everything previous to really become a part of that embodied experience going forward.
Yeah, it is that space. It quite literally is the process of opening up the door for creative ideas to flow. And again, I'll bring this back to parenting, where whenever I hear that my kiddo is bored, I'm like, yes, something amazing is about to
Early
happen.
Browns.
Yeah. And she thinks that she's going to get like TV or something out of it. And I'm like, actually, when you tell me you're bored, I'm going to I hope she can't hear me right now. I am going to extend the amount of time that you're not allowed to be stimulated by screens and stuff or audio, because audiobooks are one of the things that she is really obsessed with right now, which is great. I love that she is exploring these creative things and it helps with her vocabulary, but it's taking up space. So when we are bored, that's actually when the creative ideas come in. That's when the brain starts to stimulate those thought processes. And I've started learning more and more about the processes of these big creatives like Carl Jung. And, we've heard about these people who will go out to the middle of nowhere and in order to stimulate those thoughts, become deprived of all of that external influence so that the internal can come out and blossom. So that's a really important piece. Our bodies are wanting to be stimulated, or well, our brain is wanting to be stimulated because we've kind of trained it and there's that reward system built in with that. But the true magic really does come out when the space, it's literally the door being opened for that creative flow.
I completely agree.
Yeah. Ugh, and we'll get to the creative side next too, but first, before that, let's chat about social rest. And this is a big one for massage therapists because we've got toxic clients that we work with sometimes, and we've also got toxic coworkers sometimes. And we also just, I mean, it is a social career that we have. We're interacting deeply with people's lives. And oftentimes we hear stories that are triggering or that we have a hard time holding space for. Goodness knows, whenever it's an election year, there's always a conversation about how do I handle clients who have differing political opinions. The funny thing is they had differing political opinions before that. You just didn't know.
Exactly.
So what are some of the signs that we need social rest?
So, the signs of social rest, again, whether that is in excess or in depletion, are feeling drained by people, feeling social burnout. Doesn't matter if you're typically introverted or extroverted, the social burnout is very real, or feeling lonely or detachment. I feel like dissociation is something that is frequently mentioned within our scope of practice in a couple of different ways. And I feel like I could comfortably categorize regular dissociation as a part of depletion of social rest as well. Because how over or understimulated must you be socially if you're not even willing to connect with yourself in that way? Everything is too much to the point to where you're just like, goodbye, body, goodbye, mind.
Yeah, well, I wonder, I mean, that hit my heart, you saying that. That was a real, like, wow, okay. If it's so much that I'm not even capable of connecting with myself, that I think that a lot of times we do struggle to connect with ourselves because there's been so much repressed there. We do come from a place of wanting to serve others. Again, we have that people pleasing tendency. We want to support others. And even if there's chaos going on in our lives, we just shut that up. We zip that bag closed and we shove that to the side so that we can show up and serve others. And we have that tendency to just be like, nope, 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 pushing down my own stuff. And so when it gets to the point of being capable of being in tune and in touch with ourselves, there's a lot it's kind of like a jack in the box, it's been pushed down. It's going to be scary to come see it. And again, another reason why I love hypnotherapy and some of the practices that I'm developing for massage therapists is it allows that safe space to just kind of journey into like, hey, a reconnection with your higher self or maybe a childlike self version that's been, hasn't been listened to, like we spoke about earlier, and gives that really safe place to be able to reconnect with that so that it can then show up more authentically in our day-to-day interactions with our clients so that we can handle those toxic interactions from a place that's more resourced and more capable of, wow, I'm not going to take on that person's story and just be like, oh, okay. And yeah, I mean, there's so many instances where we find ourselves in a tough pickle socially with clients, and being resourced is essential for working through that.
I completely agree. And I know that I feel like we've mentioned dissociation a couple times throughout this episode, specifically at least. And I do feel like I want to point out that there's no judgment in saying that. People, we often learn that coping mechanism at a very young age, and that is it was an attempt at a healthy boundary from wherever our nervous system was at that point in time. Our body, our mind, our heart thoughts like, I care about myself. I'm going to protect myself the only way I know how to right now. And that's just kind of stepping out a little bit, checking out a little bit. And so I think that that's just such an important part in going through the process of whether it's rewiring that tendency or reconnecting with yourself further down the line, is just acknowledging that that was our bodies, our nervous systems doing the absolute best they could at that moment. And there is no judgment if that has been a regular occurrence for someone throughout their practice or throughout life. But it's just, it's beautiful. It is beautiful being able to come back from that. And through all of these practices and all the types of rest, I do feel like being mindful of each of these types of rest does help reconnect the gap from that regular dissociation.
Yeah. And I love how you visualize that reconnection of the gap as like hand holding, which is a very compassionate gesture. It really is self-compassion, recognizing. I love that you mentioned that too, because we can get really hard on ourselves about like, wow, I'm dissociating. Like, and then that negative voice of like, oh, well, I've been a terrible practitioner, da 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 da. No, really, it is the best tool that we had at that time. Like you said, it is something that probably happened way young at an early age before we had any other resources. And that was the best one it had access to. And that is beautiful that it had access to something to protect themselves, right? So coming from compassion, I always love to mention the book Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff for practitioners who are struggling with stepping into a loving practice for themselves because there has been so much self-judgment or shame or just an lack of modeling for holding space for that in their own life, and being able to give oneself compassion around that is really, really helpful.
I completely agree. Thank you for yet another book recommendation to put on my list.
Absolutely.
I'm
That'll
excited.
never end.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I love about it.
Well, and with the social aspect of this too, like sometimes, okay, say we do use massage sessions as a way of dissociating, and if that's what we have access to at that moment, then great, it's a meditative practice. We can use that for self-care from the place that we're at. But let's say that chatty Cathy comes in and they're bringing in all of their toxic issues. They're talking about how they are, experiencing an affair situation with their husband, or their kid is going through this problem and it's really, really emotionally draining. That cannot create space for using that as a meditative practice and can contribute to a need for social rest.
Most definitely. Some big energies to work through.
Yeah.
I I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. Um, because of course we're not mental health professionals, but in times where you have a regular client that is often outpouring those kinds of situations, I feel like I like to put on a little bit of a mental health, not mental health practitioner, but like an awareness cap to where, in therapy sessions regularly, they do not give advice. They hold space best they can. And if they do say anything, it's typically a little reflective. It's just a little like, wow, that sounds like a really difficult experience for you. How have you been handling that? How have you been feeling that? Just a little introspective, a little reflective. And I don't know why, because oftentimes, of course, that leads to a deeper outpour in a lot of ways. But if you are grounded, embodied in yourself, and you're asking those things, I'm sure you've had this experience as well. You can feel the shifts. You can feel them letting things go without taking it on yourself. And I'm not quite sure what that process is, why it works that way, but it's fascinating to experience.
Well, it's the aspect of validation, right? Like pretty much all the time, like, I see this all the time on the massage forums when people are talking about like, this client is just offloading on me and I don't know how to do this. This is outside of my scope of practice. And Really, they're not looking to use you as a therapist. It's our reaction and our response to that that actually encourages or discourages them using us as a therapist. But what they are actually seeking is validation, just like any human. And I think even just the one sentence of what you said previously of like, wow, that seems like a really challenging experience, is all that they need to just be able to take that deep breath, and then their body is able to shed it because they're being held in that way. But I also do want to kind of give permission for practitioners who are like, no, that's not my job. And I also like, this person is pissing me off. And maybe they're talking about how they did something that goes really against my personal values. And I do not have it in me to say, wow, that seems like a really frustrating experience when I don't have the level of compassion for that, because, arguably there might be scenarios like that. And I want to give permission to kind of gray rock those clients. And if you don't know what I mean by that, it's kind of just the response, or not even responding, because it's not your job to talk to them. And I've done this many times, and this comes from a people pleasing place of feeling like, oh gosh, they want me to respond. But I've experimented with this in my own practice, and I mean, I don't like perpetuating conversation at all in my sessions, really. I'm not, if I'm chit chatting and we're having a great time and it's part of what therapeutically helps them, I gauge that based off of their personality. But for those clients that are just really talking opinionated things that don't really stimulate me emotionally, and I have a hard time holding space, experiment with the discomfort of not responding and just continuing the job that they're paying you for, which is massaging them. And it's interesting because I always go back to, I think it is Mel Robbins who I heard say this the first time: no response is a response. And so I want to give permission for that as well, because yes, we can come from the place of validating and acknowledging, and sometimes that's what they need for their body to shift. But also, sometimes what they need is a nonverbal message that those conversations aren't going to be happening in this space, and that's perfectly okay.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Thank you so much for flipping that coin because they are both equally important.
And you can have space for both in your practice as well. You absolutely can. And it's about recognizing which client gets which side of the coin.
Just a little shift gears.
Yeah. And if they don't like that you didn't respond to them, that's perfectly fine. They can, be aggravated by that and go work with someone else who's going to validate the opinions that you don't want to validate. And that's perfectly fine. And I think it's really important to mention that social anxiety around specific clients is a thing. There would be times during the peak of some of my burnout experiences where I would not be able to sleep. I had chronic insomnia for a very long time. It was most certainly around specific clients. If I'd see that client on the books the next day, I would struggle to sleep because I was anxious about working with that particular person. And it's okay to fire the clients that, we think that firing clients is only for people who are disrespectful of our boundaries, or who do something inappropriate, or who no-show a couple of times. It is actually okay to refer someone out who just is not an energetic fit, who you are anxious about. And if we have social anxiety about any aspect of our lives, whether it's going and hanging out with a specific friend group, or being around a specific family member, or being around a specific client, whatever it is, recognizing that that category of social rest might need to be fed a little bit, and not that like cut off that family member forever, but how do we create boundaries around that feel nourishing for us, so that we can, if we do have to interact with that person, how can we do that from a place where we're not as, high strung and a little bit more resourced.
Yes, completely. It makes me think of, I don't remember the exact continuing education course that spoke about this, but there's a concept of meta massage where within body mechanics or techniques where it feels just as good to give the treatment as it does for the receiver. So in incorporating, they were mentioning a couple of different Thai techniques, I believe, to where you get to stretch your body as they're stretching their body, and it's this beautiful feedback loop. And genuinely, what you're speaking to and is an example how that concept of meta massage, it feels just as good for us as practitioners to give as it does for the client to receive, can be woven into all of these types of rest. I only heard about it in a physical sense, but what you were talking about, creating that boundary, being able to find the ways that this feels just as good on a sensory, social, mental, emotional level for us as it does for the clients. And I'm so glad that there are so many tools at our disposal. Like, yes, it does take a lot to shift through, but there are so many different ways that we can make this profession just as nurturing for us as it is for all the people we come across each day.
Yeah, and it looks so different for each and every one of us, right? Like for me, it might be 45 minutes of yoga and then some hypnotherapy and then a walk. And then someone else really needs to go get that exercise, the cardio, and then go like sing and dance and do it. Like I'm very yin in my approach. There might be someone who's very yang and expressive in their approach. And the cool thing about that too is that we bring those different energies. They're both resourced, very balanced energies from their own, place. We bring that energy to our sessions and then can serve a very unique group of people because of that. And so I'm over here serving my clients in this way, in the way that they really like to receive. And then the group of people that aren't operating on that frequency and need a different one have access to another very well resourced practitioner who's doing things in a different way. And it allows for that meeting the clients where they all are, rather than me being like, I have to meet everyone and I'm trying to serve everyone by doing all of the things, which is ultimately depleting me and also doing the clients a disservice, because those clients that need something totally different aren't being met at the level that they could be if I was authentically expressing myself in that capacity. So someone else over here who does things totally differently is going to be able to serve those clients at their highest capacity. And it's a win-win scenario for everyone.
Completely. It's so good.
Yeah. Well, moving into creative rest, that was something that was kind of interesting for me because I'm a very creative person, but I don't allow myself to rest with it. So I'm curious about your thoughts on this because as I was looking at these notes, I'm like, looking at my creative history. For example, I started doing felted toys. I started making felted baby toys when my daughter was really young. And it first started with like, I want to make these toys for my daughter because that's fun. But I immediately went to, I have to make money with this. I have to do these things with it and monetize this because felting tools are expensive. But also, like, if I'm doing something and it's a value, then I have to receive that value through monetary gains. And I get in my head about every creative project I do, which is something interesting I've noticed about myself. But let's just talk about what creative rest looks like, what it might look like when someone needs it.
Beautiful. So, if someone is experiencing some trouble with creative rest, it typically looks like blocked inspiration, burnout from problem solving. And although this isn't something that I found again in doing research, I personally feel like not full on dissociation, but if someone finds themselves like they're not feeling the same spark from their own creative endeavors, or if they're not feeling the spark from creative practices that they admire watching other people, like for instance, I'm not a felter personally, but the instant you said that, it's like, you best believe I'm going to be asking to see your creations after this. But if someone finds that there are things that they're interested in and they aren't able to receive or feel the beauty from it. I'm not sure if there's a specific word for that. And apathy maybe is the closest thing that I can think of, but I think that would be a pretty big indicator of creative rest if you're not able to connect with the beauty in all the different forms of expression, art, music, body work, any of that.
Yeah. And there are so many different ways to express ourselves creatively in the massage realm as well, whether it's developing a new technique, getting a friend on the table and just watching YouTube videos. I know, Kelsey, you and I still need to do this where we pop up some Lomi Lomi videos and we have like a slumber party around trying new techniques. Like if that's what it looks like, or if it looks like picking out a new paint color for your office and then kind of figuring out your decor around that. Some people love the home decor aspect of the autonomy that we have in our practices. Or if it's designing a new business card or making the aesthetic of your website or social media very specific, there are a lot of ways to get super creative in this profession that I don't think a lot of us recognize can be nourishing. Now, again, for someone, they're thinking about making their website branded and social media all branded might give them a heart attack to think about because that's not their strong suit. So again, I want to kind of give permission in this, like it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you find something that's creative for you. And again, it doesn't even have to be in the business. It can be in your life. For me, a lot of it is planning my gardens and what plants should go back there and what colors are going to complement this color in this little patch of flowers. As long as there's a way for the creative mind to kind of just play and have permission to play, it creates so much space for the constructive world, like that logical world. We need that kind of left brain, right brain to be balanced. And there's a space that's opened up when that artsy, and again, you don't have to be this artsy person. I don't consider myself to be like an artist by any means, but being in flow with what inspires you, giving the space for what inspires you will allow space for when you're working on the type A strategic stuff that might frustrate you in your business otherwise. It really does create that balance within the two hemispheres of the brain.
I well, I love that. I completely agree. And my mind keeps being brought back to the integration aspect that we were talking about earlier, where something like sensory rest is essential to integrate the things that you've learned up to this point. And I feel like it's very applicable to the creative rest as well, because if you've been creating so much and you feel a little, that creative muscle is a little exhausted, just trying to integrate either the things that you have been partially working on creating up till this point, or taking the time to integrate the things that other people have created that you've received, that seems like it would create a lot of space, a lot of space. Or I guess if someone is feeling like they are creatively understimulated, then maybe it is okay to look at taking a new course. I know that we always talk about how you know everything that you need to know. I still fully believe that. But if someone does find themselves a little like a little meh, a little creative, like they don't see like the sparklies around the creative process anymore, then maybe it is okay to take in some. You don't have to worry about creating at this moment. You can go and soak in what someone else has created to give you that spark again.
Yeah, well,
Um,
going and getting inspired, and really what that like for me is when it comes down to like you don't need another modality, that's coming from a place of feeling like you need another modality in order to be enough. Whereas what you're
mm,
speaking about is like go and check out another modality to get inspired again. Go see something different. I love getting on other people's tables and experiencing what other people are doing and getting inspired by the different styles of massage that there are. So there's another permission slip to go get a massage and just experience someone else's work to get out of your own box. But if you're taking another class because you're like, okay, well, I'll be good enough when I have these skill sets, and then I'll finally be able to raise my rates, or then my clients will be able to respect me. That's a very different place than like, ooh, that class looks really super cool and I'm really excited about learning how to work on the floor more or how to work with my elbows more, or just that teacher seems like a knowledge like wizard. That's a totally different energy, and it's going to serve it's going to come from a place of that creative rest, like what we're talking about, versus a place of nourishing a part of your subconscious mind that doesn't think you're good enough as you are.
I love that distinction. Very
Yeah.
poignant.
And it's important whenever we sign up for something that we assess where that's coming from. Because if it's coming from a place of not enoughness, then you can work through that for free in the link in our show notes to the free breakthrough session. So work through that for free rather than spending more than $500 on your next modality class and determine if where that's coming from. So moving on to the last but not least, spiritual rest. And my goodness, this might even be somewhat of a triggering topic for some people because I know that there's a lot of people who have really had poor experiences with whatever upbringing they had exposed to a connection with spirituality. But at the end of the day, I believe that massage therapy and the wellness profession is actually a very spiritual practice. And I'm really curious about what you learned about this type of rest, Kelsey.
This is probably one of the wider spectrums of experience that people will have within this type of rest. But no matter what your belief system or perspective towards spirituality is, if you are lacking in this type of rest, people might find themselves experiencing a lack of purpose, disconnection, and an emptiness. I guess kind of similar to the apathy that we were talking about previously with creative rest, but from more of a that lack of embodiment, that lack of connection to not just yourself, but in your perception and interaction with this world that we're living in, with these moments we're experiencing day in and day out. And the thing that I love about even coming from the aspect of if you do not have a spiritual practice, if you do not have any kind of spiritual belief, that is okay because reconnecting with that part of this idea of rest can be as simple as just reconnecting with your why. Reconnecting with your why, and whether it's what you want to do in your practice, in the care that you want to bring to your clients, in the care that you want to bring and how you take care of yourself. Reconnecting with your why, both in and outside of your massage practice, can be all it takes to refill your cup in a spiritual rest perspective. We are human beings, we are meaning making machines, and there is no end to the ways that we can associate meaning in a spiritual sense. But no matter what perspective you are coming from, reconnecting with your why and what you were doing each moment, it brings you back to the present. It brings you back to here and now, and it can help shake off a lot of those signs of depletion.
Yeah. Connecting with yourself, I think, is one of the tools that helps so much, especially if you don't have a connection to a higher power. I don't remember where it was. I think it may have been one of the meditations I listened to on Mind Valley, but there was a practice that I was exposed to that was talking about, connect with a higher power, connect with that sense of, oneness. And if it's a God creature that you can connect with, then great. But if not, just simply connect with the sensation that you are here, and that is a miracle unto itself, regardless of if it's connected to a spiritual bigger thing happening or not. The fact that we can connect and experience ourselves is enough of a spiritual experience that's really accessible and undeniable, to be completely honest. Like closing your eyes and just recognizing that you are in a body, you're in an experience, and there is the moment right here, right now. That is a spiritual experience. And I really did love my first dabbles into hypnotherapy a couple of years ago. And another reason why I became so hard set on developing these tracks for massage therapists, particularly, is because it actually allowed me to have those spiritual experiences in the process of connecting with my higher self, not in a like, transcendental out of body experience, but in just a simple like, oh, there's that there. I can connect with that in any moment. I know a lot of people who do regularly access that through psychedelic experiences, through deep, long winded meditative practices. And I like to kind of challenge the thought that that's not even necessary for tapping into that experience when you have a practice that guides you into the ability to tap into what is here right now in every present moment. That is such a I don't even think we need to have anything beyond that acknowledgement of tapping into yourself right here is mystical enough and can give you such amazing lessons. I remember when I did have one experience in a hypnotherapy where I met with my higher self and she's giving me a gift, and this is all walked through in a verbal guided practice, and she gives me a gift and you allow space to hear what they have to say. And I remember at this one point, I had this hearing in my head of, you are already enough. You have what you need. Now go.
Mm.
Like, now go and do the thing. And I heard that so, like, lovingly. And the fact that I heard that, I remember that whole day, I was like, yeah, I got this. Let's do this. And I built something really cool. And that experience is accessible to everyone. No matter what your spiritual beliefs are, you have the capacity to connect to the version of yourself that is as attuned as you want to be, as clear on your vision as you want to be, who has the things that you want. You can tap into that. And sometimes having a guided process can be really supportive in allowing you to be drawn toward that, because we do sometimes get really disconnected from that. But being connected to your why in that sense, like you were talking about, does bring a deeper meaning to why we show up every day and why we even feel so passionate about depleting ourselves in the way that we tend to do, right? And for me, in the very beginning of growing my practice, it really was my daughter. My daughter was my why. And it didn't have to go beyond that. It didn't have to be this big vision of like, well, I want to heal the world and I want to see massage therapists thrive and I want to cure chronic pain forever. It didn't even have to be that big. And it is perfectly okay if your why is like, well, I want to pay off that loan, or I
Mm.
want to be able to expand my practice to have another practitioner so that I don't feel so lonely in my private practice, right? It can be something that is more immediate and more of a closed circle and closer to your point of reference. And being able to have a practice that allows you to attune to that and know authentically what feels really good. Because there's so much external pressure about like, well, I have to, in order to be successful, I have to have this massive clinic with all of these employees, or I need to have this many Google reviews, or I need to have completely full books. And yes, those are really great goals. If those are your goals, they're perfectly fine. But having a deeper sense of why you want that, because I promise you it goes beyond those surface level outside goals. There's something deeper inside of you that gives meaning. And when we can tap into that and provide that for ourselves, it makes showing up so much easier. And there are definitely other ways. I mean, I can go on and on and on about hypnotherapy just because I'm a little bit obsessed, but I'm sure there's other ways that people can tap into that spiritual rest for themselves as well.
So much of what you said resonates so deeply. And my mind keeps going back to, okay, what if someone is more analytical in their thought process? They don't have much of a connection to the spiritual side of thing, or it doesn't resonate with them for whatever reason. And if they were also, let's say, going through a period of time in their life where they are a bit more disconnected, or they have a lot of big heavies in different facets of their life, to where if it is harder to connect with a why, if it is harder to feel comfortable in connecting with your body and your mind, even something as simple as you're sitting in a room, you're sitting in a space out in public, take in the fact that statistically, the fact that any of us exist, insane. The number of connections that had to come together on a human level generations back for us to be able to come into this world, for us to be able to survive every variable on every facet of life, to live right here, right now. The fact that any of us can be at the same space at the same time, creating and connecting in whatever way we do in every single moment is nothing short of awe-inspiring on a statistical level. And if someone isn't able to connect with their why or connect with their body, just acknowledging that fact, and that since we do have these beautiful meaning making machines minds, we can reconnect with that space from whatever perspective. The possibilities are truly endless, and the abundance that you're talking about from tuning into that space is, there aren't words for it. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
And it does kind of require us to attune our meaning making machine, because if we're coming from a place of like, well, I don't know what my why is. Let's say that that's what we have tuned our meaning making machine is and to, then that's what our brain is going to look for confirmation for. So think about the frame that we're asking these questions from. If we set the tune of our brain to, I don't know what the meaning of this is, I don't know what my why is, that's what you've set it to. And your brain is going to find more and more evidence for why you don't know what your why is. But if you come from a different frame of mind, so for example, instead you set your thought of, I wonder what my why is. It's a very
Mm.
nuanced difference. But our brains are so literal when it comes down to the words that we use in our brain. I don't know what my why is. Cool. I'm going to find more reasons why I don't know what my why is. But I wonder what my why is makes your brain say, well, I wonder, I need to have an answer to this. Your brain needs to find answers. That's what it's designed to do. But we need to program what answers it's looking for. So
Mm.
shifting to a sense of I wonder rather than I don't know allows us to be more open to seeing what the possibilities could possibly be. And I love that about the brain, because we think that we have to do this extreme shift. Let's take, for example, affirmations. If you want to say in the mirror, I am a strong, confident human being, and you meanwhile are like in the back of your mind, like, yeah, but you're telling yourself you're a piece of shit just 5 minutes ago. That's too big of a reattunement. It's like kind of like you haven't like added WD-40 to the dial in a long time, and it's just not going there. So we need to just slightly shift instead of saying I'm a strong, confident, capable human, saying like, I'm excited to learn how to be more of a strong, confident, capable human. So it's just that I'm looking for ways to learn how to be that way. You're honoring that there's a part of you that doesn't believe that, but you're shifting the focus of what your brain is looking for, the evidence that it's going to be absorbing for you over the next 24 hours, to something that's actually going to be constructive for you. So recognizing what our brain does and the fact that it is, like you said, a meaning making machine, we need to give it something to make meaning of in a way that's going to be productive for us.
I love that curiosity aspects that you're talking about, and asking what could it be rather than why isn't it. The curiosity automatically sets the foundation to where no that like ego placing judgment on any of the answers that comes up, that can't exist in a space of genuine curiosity, whether you're thinking about yourself or another.
Yeah. Oh, I love talking about this. We could go on and on and on. And seriously, I'm so excited about all of the conversations we're going to be having in the future. So, for all of our listeners, do know Kelsey and I are going to be talking about so many cool things. We've got awesome conversations lined up. We've got awesome guest invitees lined up as well. And we're just going to continue this conversation. And I do really want to encourage you, if this sparked something for you today, if this is resonating for you, maybe you're realizing that the kind of rest that you've been giving yourself isn't actually the kind of rest you need, or maybe you're just kind of starting to recognize that the burnout doesn't really always come from doing too much. It's just simply happening because the right kind of restoration process isn't in the mix. I'm excited to offer the free resource that we've developed to be able to kind of assess what that is so that you can sprinkle that in without feeling like you have to do more and more and more. And I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways is that real rest isn't just about taking time off. And it definitely is not the same for everyone. We all have something that's so different that will nourish us. And what it comes down to is having built-in ways to recover along this big spectrum of rest, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, creatively, spiritually, whatever it is, so that you're not relying on those next pieces of vacation or time off that you've reserved for enjoying your life, so that you're not using those as burnout recovery times. Because when we wait until we're sick, if we wait until we're in pain, until we're completely fried, we're already in the red. It's kind of like that old saying when if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. This is the same way. If you're already feeling that pain, if you're already feeling these things, it's already a sign that it's been depleted for a while. And as massage therapists, we're not just using our bodies in this work. We are using our hearts, we're using our intuition, we're using our attention. And that means that we really do need these layered, thoughtful ways to refill those specific tanks. They each have individual tanks that we need to kind of fill up on a regular basis, and they need their own kind of fuel as well. And I think that this talk really nourishes that in that way. Like, what kind of fuel can I add into these specific tanks? So if you're feeling depleted and you're unsure where to begin, again, we have that simple tool to help you. It's a one-page assessment that helps you kind of figure out which type of rest you might need the most right now, and a few ideas on how to get started. And we're even including some custom hypnotherapy tracks based on which area you need more support in, which is a tool typically only found inside my community, but this comes with your download, and you'll have ongoing access to it to be able to continually assess the areas that need more support, and then quick and totally free ways to implement that into your busy life. So the link for that is in the show notes below. And if you have loved this conversation, go ahead and send it to another massage therapist friend who needs to hear it, because this shift, this implementation of rhythm and a self-assessment, it does not have to be hard, but it does need to be intentional. And the more of us who are working from a place of nourishment instead of depletion, the better our entire profession gets to be and our impact on the world gets to be. So I want to thank you, Kelsy, for inspiring this conversation and adding your special sauce to it. It has been so lovely connecting with you today.
Love all of our conversations, Gretchen. Very excited for the future.
Yes, yay. And thank you, listeners, for joining. We will catch you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to The Sustainable Bodyworker. If something resonated for you today, grab your free breakthrough session, which includes a custom hypnotherapy track to help you unlock the next level. Grab it now with the link in the show notes. And to hear more, hit subscribe. We'll see you next time.